Hi everybody, this is the patch 10.16 Post Mortem. Again, everyone so far has given me good feedback that you guys like hearing these. So for now, good to keep doing these. And what this is a chance to look back at the last patch and talk about what we did right, what we did wrong, where we screwed up, and where we're going from here. So let's do that. So, first thing, new galaxy, Salvage World. So far, this galaxy seems to be a pretty big success. Players seem to have had a lot of fun with it. I think this has been a good galaxy that I'm happy we shipped when we shipped it. I think if this had been one of the first galaxies, it would have been really bad. It would have been too complicated. But I think now that we're damn near the end of the set and players are really advanced, this is opening up new strategies, which I think is cool. So that's been good. As far as the removal of Star Cluster, certainly I know players would have preferred Binary or Dwarf gone away, but this one was older, and so that seems to be fine. No one's been like, man, I miss Star Cluster. So I think Star Cluster was kind of one of our like medium tier ones. So overall, though, Galaxy seems to be good. In-game item recipes are here. I mean, this is just good. I think a lot of people aren't used to it existing, so we don't see it get used much. But I think this is definitely good. And what this will be really valuable for is when Set 4 comes out and a lot of the items have changed and a lot of the item recipes have changed. This will be really good. So happy to see this here. Again, props to the team. Okay, items. We shipped a bunch of item changes this patch. Hand of Justice. Hand of Justice went from 50 health on hit to 50% heal Omnivamp, basically. So this change was good with a big ol' asterisk. This item went from no one ever builds it, ever, to now all of a sudden people are building it. And it's a pretty good item. The item in itself is not overpowered. It's actually a pretty balanced item. You throw this item on a Jin or, a Zaya, and it's a good item. It's not overpowered. It's good. Sorry, people are saying zoom in. There you go. But there is one asterisk that I can't talk about right now as to why this was a mistake. But it's funny. It's not for the reason you think. Like, having more people build this item is good. It did cause a problem. But what I'll say is, for the longevity of the set, it is good that we caught this problem now. Now, my chat right now is spamming Mech Kek W. Believe it or not, I don't think this item is overpowered in a vacuum on Mech. But again, sometime in the future I'll explain why it's actually problematic there. So, but again, overall though, I'm glad we made this change because again, it exposed a problem that we needed to fix, and it made an item like with two good components into a valuable item. So that part was good. Hextech Gunblade. This now generates a shield. I think this change was fine. It shows the potential of making this kind of change, but at the same time, it didn't really move the needle much. Like, Gunblade's still not a great item, but now if you get it on like a Victor or an Aurelian Soul, you don't feel as bad, so that part was good. So I'm glad we made this change. Yeah, otherwise pretty solid. Locket of the Iron Solari, we gave 25 to the 2 and 3 star versions. It was fine. It was a change that bumped it up. It made it a little bit better when you get it. People still aren't rushing to build out Locket, which was never the intention. So it just makes the item a little bit better. Sweet. And again, I don't think this item will ever be a top tier build because none of our support items are ever going to be top tier builds. Zeke's will never be top tier. Chalice will never be top tier. Locket will never be top tier, unless they're like so broken that they become top tier. And that's just something we have to think about. Is like, is it okay to have support items? And I think the answer is yes. So, yeah. Hurricane buff. This is another example of a change that was fine and didn't move the needle. No one's building Hurricane on Jin. That didn't change anything. People are building Hurricane. They're feeling a little bit worse about it. It certainly didn't solve the the problem of like, oh sweet, I got a cloak, now I can't wait to build Hurricane. That certainly didn't do it. Yeah, basically blasters and battlecast benefited from this slightly. But even then, when you do the math on this, like a lot of people will point out Yi as the benefiter of this one, and like Yi didn't really benefit from this at all because he's doing true damage and on hits. He doesn't really care about 5% more of his AD. So that being said, I think it showed what we need to do with Hurricane, and so you can actually expect to see some Hurricane changes in set 4. So Shiv, this one's good. So we made a change where Shiv was slightly less damage in the early game, but if they're CC'd or had a shield, it's better. And so this allowed the item to scale a little bit better in the late game. This item is good now. This item's fun. Zaya uses it well. Kog'Maw uses it well. It's pretty good. Honestly, I think people are sleeping on this item a little bit. It's still quite good. Data shows it to be damn near the best early game item. So if you ever want a win streak, it's really good. So people also figured out some cool combinations, like putting a frozen heart on somebody else so that you can have the Shiv count as CC. But yeah, Shiv, this is a good change. Shiv is now a good item. It's not overpowered. It's just good. Yeah, that one's good. And then lastly, Swordbreaker. The one thing I'll say about this change, like clearly we need to change Swordbreaker. That just needs to happen. We knew that. But shipping this change was actually kind of good. I have seen it be used as a counter to the mech in crazy circumstances. So the fact that that's even an option is good. So I'm glad we made this change. It's still not a great item. It's still not a primary item you're going to build. But I'm glad we made this change. So it now doesn't feel awful to get it. Okay, traits. Monoreeve. We basically nerfed the Monoreeve effect, and I think this is a typo. I think it's supposed to say 33%, but Ezreal, Shroud, and Monoreaver went from 40 to 33. I think this was a good change. I think Shroud is still a good item, but not quite as oppressive. I think Monoreaver, the trait, is still good, and I think Ezreal probably is a little weaker now for this. I think if anything, this hurt Jinx comps more than anything. But good change, move the needle slightly. And the other thing I'll say here is like, this is the kind of change we need to be making more of when we're in this state of the game, which is like very light touches. You know, going from 40% to 33% mana is probably the equivalent of one auto attack in most cases. But like, that's good. We shouldn't be doing it in massive changes like this. So, Chrono 4, 6, and 8 got buffed. And now we see Chrono everywhere, and every comp is being played Chrono, and no one plays anything but Chrono. No, wait, no, that's not what happened at all. It actually did very little. No one plays 6 and 8 Chrono. They're still kind of joke traits. The actual impact of this change, hilariously enough, was that if you high roll the 6 Cyber 4 Chrono build, that build got better. That was basically the only impact this actually had. It did open up some more fun builds in our for fun players, which is important to think about. So like, yeah, Chrono Ashe, Chrono Xerath builds can be fun. But they're definitely not competitive builds. So, but again, in the end, I'm glad we made this change, because now if you want to go these for fun builds, they're better, and it didn't ruin the meta. So we should be making these kind of changes. It does give us something to look about with Chrono in the long term, right? Like, why did this not work as a vertical trait? What is its problem? How are we going to make something better? But yeah, I'm glad we made that change. The Infiltrator jump time change. This was just a good change to make. So now it doesn't matter where you put your Infiltrators. There's no like weird optimizations of like putting them on the front line. This is just good. Mech Pilot. Well, let's be clear. Right now, Mech is one of the better comps, so definitely glad I snuck this change in last minute. This is the reduction of the spell at level 3, 4, 5. Yeah. If Mech did even more damage at 3, 4, 5, that would be pretty rough, right? So glad we did this one. Rebel Shield. This one's funny because a lot of people, when they saw this, were like, oh, it's just going to be a Jinx meta because we've buffed Rebel and Gangplank and whatever. And actually, it turned out to be the right buff, which was 6 Rebel. Got to be a little bit more playable. Certainly not meta dominant, but can win games. Sweet. So this was a good change. Happy to see it. Space Pirate. Space Pirate, we buffed the item drop rate from 25 to 33%. This is a good change with a small asterisk, which is that it definitely made Space Pirate more playable, but also definitely did not fix Space Pirate's core issue. And Space Pirate's core issue continues to be its core issue, and probably always will be, which is that it's a very high roll comp, right? Like, if you hit that Gangplank in 4-3, I think Soju is the one who describes this best, where it's like, if you hit that Gangplank on 4-3, you win! Hooray! You will probably win the game, and the data supports that, right? It's like, if you look at the data graph of, like, Space Pirate, it's actually funny. It's like survivor bias kicks in, and by 6-4, it's like the best comp in the game by a, like, stupid margin. It is absolutely the best high roll comp in the game. And this helped that, for sure. But, you know, if it's not, it's not. So, but in the end, like, letting players have those high roll fun moments, I think was good. And to be honest, seeing Space Pirate in competitive sometimes, good. So, would I make this change again? Absolutely. Vanguard 6 getting nerfed from 1,000 armor to 900 armor. When I did this on the patch rundown, someone called this a placebo nerf. They were right. They were damn right. This change didn't do anything. This change, 6 Vanguard is still good exactly when it's good, and it's just as good when it's good, and still pretty unbeatable when it's good, and yep, it is what it is. So, yeah, something to think about is, like, should 6 Vanguard be this high? Should 6 Vanguard even exist? There's some weirdness there. But I will say, at least in this meta, like, 6 Vanguard is nowhere near as good as it was a patch or two ago. With all the mech players, with all the magic damage out there, the victors, like, 6 Vanguard's not really being run much anyway, so good to see. On to champions. Fiora health buff. Would I do this one again? Probably. This feels a little bit like power creep. And let's talk about the comps it buffed. It buffed Cybernetic, which is a well-performing comp already. It should be. It buffed Blade Master, which is a well-performing comp. Did they need it? Did it open up the early game more? A little? A little? You know, the end result is, like, she's not the weakest champ in the game, which is good. Looking at the balanced numbers, it seems good. So, in a vacuum, I'd probably do this again, but it's debatable. It's debatable. And it's funny, I'm going to catch myself saying that a lot on, like, a lot of these really small nickel and dime changes that, like, oh, this is debatable. But I want to be clear, that's kind of the tactic we need to be taking when the meta is where it is right now, right? Is like, the meta is good. We shouldn't be hitting things with a hammer. We should be making very light, chiselly touches. And if we're like, I didn't know if that changed anything, it means it probably was a good change, because it clearly did something. There are rounds out there being decided because Fiora had 50 more health, and it's nudging them in the right direction. So we should be doing that. So anytime I find myself saying it's debatable, that means it probably was the right thing to do. Speaking of which, Zed change. Kind of debatable. I don't think people are still using Zed as a counter to Jhin comps any more than they were before. But Rebel got a little bit better because of this. Infiltrator, Mech, things like that got a little bit better. So probably fine. Bard change. This is where we nerfed 1-star Bard from 8 mana to 5. And this one's funny because if you looked at the data in 10-15, if you got a Bard in 2-1, 2-2 in that area, you kind of, like, the advantage you had was massive. Saint Vicious was absolutely correct. It was like your odds of top 4ing went from like 52 to like 68. It was insane, the power that thing gave you. So we nerfed it. And after the nerf, I remember I saw the Reddit thread where someone was like, is it ever worth even running Bard anymore? And there was some debate. And the answer is, I can tell you from the data, yes, it's still worth it. It's just not as worth it. AKA, it's more balanced. Woohoo! That 68 dropped down to like 61. And so it was like, yeah, getting Bard early, still good. Just not as free auto win as it was before. So, cool, we did it. That was the goal. Good change. Master Yi 3 change. Snuck this one in last minute. And glad we did. Glad we did. Blade Master's doing very well. Blade Master's still doing very well. So, cool. Which means we brought it down to more balanced. People like Socks still doing very well with it. It's not an auto win anymore. It can be beat. The numbers show it went down a bit, but it's still quite good. So, cool. If anything, there's a chance, very small chance, that like even now Master Yi 2 is a tiny bit too strong. Just a tiny bit. But like when I say tiny bit, I'm like, if that number 100 said 95, we'd probably be in the right spot. So, yeah. Fizz 1 nerf. Yep. Again, didn't really change a ton, which means it was probably the right call. The Jin and Teemo nerfs. These were the attack speed nerfs for Sniper. Guess what? Astra Sniper's still really good. They're still doing very well, which means these were the right nerfs. They pushed things in the right direction. Would I do this again? Absolutely. Jinx. Okay, this one's tricky. So Jinx got a 5 AD buff, and I remember everyone reading like, oh my god, here comes Jinx meta, blah, blah, blah. If you look at the data right now, Jinx is still the worst performing 4 cost in the game. But that doesn't mean she's bad, right? Like, relativity matters here. Just because she's the worst, it doesn't mean she's bad. It just means she has trouble turning on, things like that. You know, we saw games get won with her. She can do very well. But you have to high roll a little bit. She struggles with some of the meta right now. But otherwise, she's a good champion. So it's like, does she even need more buffs? Probably not. Does her support staff maybe need buffs? Maybe. Is it like the brawlers that need the buffs? Maybe. This is where, again, we have to be really careful, right? Because like when you look at Jinx in a vacuum and say, oh, she's the worst 4 cost, she needs buffs, that's incorrect. Is it her items that she uses that needs buff? Maybe. Is it the support staff? So that's one of the fun things about balance, is like trying to figure out what element of the Jinx comps is actually the most in need. And so what you can expect to see in future patches is like, we want the Jinx comps to be better, but I doubt we'll probably be directly buffing Jinx. So this could be things like Rebel, this could be Brawlers, this could be, you know, various other things. So expect to see that kind of in the future. Lastly, not lastly, we have more after this, but Gangplank. This one, this one taught me a lot about the game. This one's crazy. So Gangplank in 10.15 was the worst 5 cost by a metric mile. Just like absolute garbage. His win rate was like 10% less. When I say 10%, we're talking like from 60 to 50 compared to the next lowest 5 cost, which was Xerath. Like, he was trash. So, we gave him 100 spell damage. It's a buff. It's a pretty sizable buff, actually. Very, very light. Not very light. It's actually, like, not as light as a lot of our other changes. Well, he went from the worst 5 cost to the best 5 cost. Just like that. Which is crazy, right? And, like, we talked about this a little bit, and Agon correctly pointed out that, like, well, the Shroud nerf also helped him a bit. You know, so it wasn't like just this, but yeah. So what you'll see in 10.17 is we're going to try to light touch it in a way probably lighter than we've ever done. We're going to take 25 back. So this will be 525, 675. So GP will be a little worse than he is now, and we'll see what happens. So, but yeah, it was pretty crazy to see that he went from worst to best. And if 25 brings him back to the worst, that'll be a fascinating lesson. If like he's really on that like hard line like that. So that's it for Gangplank. Two more things. Chase traits. We buffed chase traits. Rebel 9, Star Guardian 9, Battlecast 8, Darkstar 8, Infiltrator 6. I'm glad we did these. When you hit these, they should feel good. They do. What I can tell you is Battlecast does really well, Darkstar does really well, Infiltrator, this didn't move the needle much. Star Guardian still does really well. Rebel actually kind of still underperforms a little bit from what we'd expect from a chase trait. So, but glad we did these. In the rare cases you hit them, they feel good. Woohoo! Okay, now we have the last thing. This is the 3-star champion balance. We went through and we buffed a bunch of 3-star champions. And I know when everyone saw this, they were like, oh god, are we just going to see hyper roll meta again? And the answer is no, we didn't at all. In fact, this barely moved the needle at all. And it was funny because some of these were massive, right? Like the Leona going from 200 to 400. I remember everyone reading it and going, oh my god, she's going to be unkillable. And the answer is, she's fine. I still wouldn't chase her. No one does. Malphite being better? Sure. Didn't change much. Poppy? Didn't change much. We're not seeing Candyland builds. They don't really exist anymore. Ziggs? Sure. Ari, Annie, Blitz. I think we've seen some blitzes. Seeing some blitzes be played is kind of fun, but it's been fun, right? Like, these champions are now more fun and not overpowered. So, Darius, same thing. Lucian, same thing. Mordekaiser, same thing. Nautilus, same thing. Ezreal, we saw some early exploration of the Ezreal when the patch launched, but I think that fell off pretty quickly when people realized how inconsistent and impossible it was to do. Rumble buff, Vi buff, Vayne buff. Even the Vayne buff, I actually got to play 3-star Vayne last night, and like, she's good. She's not breaking the game. So all of these changes were good. And again, going back to my earlier statement, they didn't really move the needle much, which is probably correct, right? We don't need a hyper roll meta where everyone's trying to hit these. But if you do hit them, they're better. Good. And honestly, with a lot of these, we can probably continue to keep nudging them up. We currently don't have any plans to, but like, if this Leona said 500, probably still okay. If this 6-bomb said 650, probably still okay. You know? So like, all of these changes were just fine for the game. Gnar 4, Gnar 3, Riven 3, yep, Janna 3. I don't think I've seen a Janna 3 since I made this change. If somebody has a video of the 8-second stun, I'd love to see it. So yeah, so in the end, patch 10.16 I think was a pretty big success with one big asterisk, which I'll talk about as we go into set 4. But overall, very good. Balance seems to be in a really good spot. I think this was honestly a bunch of the right changes. The most egregious thing was probably the Gangplank. If I had to go back, taking that Gangplank and making it 50 instead of 100 probably would have been a safer call. That's probably the one change looking back where I'm just like, yeah, you should have been more cautious. Everything else, pretty good. Yeah. So, that's going to do it for this time. As always, hope you find these useful. If this is useful, let me know. If not, I'll stop doing them. Until next time, take it easy.